Right. Something a bit different today. So, instead of playing PoE 2, I'm going to read the patch notes about it. So, I died yesterday, and that brings my hardcore solo self found project to an end. I would like to make a video about it. I just need to go through all of my footage and put together all the notes I made about what I learned, some tips. Obviously, now with this massive change, the build itself, while we'll get there when we get to the skill changes. I think crossbows are still good. Reload is still in the game, but I feel like I still want to play crossbows, and that's weird. I know everyone wants to play unarmed monk, which does look pretty cool, but there's just something about it where everyone wants to play it, where it just makes me not want to play it as much. I really want to just try maybe some non-lightning crossbow. I played a bit of, what was it, explosive grenade, incendiary shot, Titan before. So maybe something fizz fire, and maybe I'll just go back to Witch Hunter. I know they didn't really update Witch Hunter very much, but I quite like his voice lines. I quite like playing the class, and I'd like to see how deflect and armor together on that part of the tree works. And also, I think you need to be at least on the south side of the tree, from the looks of things, to pick up all the good fire nodes. So I'm going to run through the patch notes, and then I'll pull together highlights from reading these into a video on YouTube. But let's get started, and then maybe if I get done, maybe I'll play some games. But just reading today, this is like a book, but it's not. There we go. So, I think the Act 4 interlude and Abyss stuff, I don't think we really need to read too much into this. So it's more content. More content is good. Not having to rerun Cruel is good. I don't think I have anything really unique or interesting to add to that. I think it would be interesting. I would like on Sunday to practice some Acts 1 to 3 campaign runs. I think that's probably going to be my goal. I'm going to migrate all of my solo self-found gear and money to another league and practice 1 to 3, see how quickly I can get that done. But the shame about that is that it makes you not want to stop and do the league mechanic while you're leveling. And it's going to be in every zone. So we'll see how that pans out, how rewarding it is. When you start getting the crafting materials, maybe you want them a bit sooner. Maybe you want to run some abysses when you're in need of the gear that they drop. The abyssal hordes are probably going to be quite rewarding for leveling. So I think it's play it by ear. And if you get a Fisher next to a unique or something, you just do it. So support gem changes. I like this change. Like I said, the intended effect of the support gems was to increase diversity. But what ended up happening was, because you could only use the best support gems in a single skill, you end up just using that main skill. So in my Galvanic Shards build, I could only use Martial Tempo in one of the skills. Though I guess I didn't use any attack skills apart from Shock Burst and Galvanic, and Martial Tempo doesn't do anything to Plasma Blast, and I ended up not liking using Plasma Blast. The unique support gems, I think, are going to be really interesting and really fun to hunt down. Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see. Also be interesting to see, they haven't really mentioned here whether they're removing some of the less useful support gems. I can only imagine now some of the more niche gems are going to be even less popular than they were before, because you can use the basic good gems multiple times. You're not going to need to find utility slots. On the other hand, now that you're more incentivized, or at least their intention is that we're more incentivized to combo, then maybe we will. So having a skill that shocks, that you can also put martial tempo on, for instance, if it's an attack skill, or faster casting, and then consuming that shock, or using something that interacts with the shock, or the ignite, or the freeze, or the chill, means then you'll use a bunch of support gems on top of the faster and extra proj that will improve that. So we'll see. And I think crossbow wise, I really liked the look of the armor piercing round. So we'll see. Yeah, I think there'll be maybe 3 skills, and with weapon swap being instant, I don't know if that's going to help with the grenade plus shot issues with crossbow. I think those might still be there. Okay. So new skills that I'm excited about. I have not played any melee. The one time I rolled Smith of Katava, I ended up rolling into crossbows. I just keep getting drawn back into crossbows. So I've not used any of the war cries. And I don't think war cries are high on my list of things to try. Though they do look pretty cool. Ancestral Cry in particular looks really cool from the video that we saw. The way that it like explodes in a fiery spiral and then gives you like walking fire and everything. So, I mean, if I do roll a fire melee character at some point, it's probably going to be based around Ancestral Cry. Poison skills are being added, Toxic Domain, and the other poison skills are being changed. I really like poison. I played Pathfinder Poison Concoction when it was viable in 0.1. Obviously, they absolutely killed it in 0.2, and I still tried to run it anyway, and ended up with a Bleed Pathfinder in Trade League, which was fine, you know. I was just sat there basically wishing that I was a Huntress, because the damage was really lacking. I couldn't really make it crit based. So yeah. Ice-based bow skills are pretty cool. I'd be very interested in trying Ice-based Ranger after my league start, which is probably going to be crossbow. Doing all of the frozen arrow stuff. And then, you know, hybrid ES deflect evasion. Added a new strength persistent buff gem, Iron Ward. Stores a percentage of the physical damage that is prevented by your armor. And then release it as an over of spikes. That's pretty cool. That sounds like fun, you know? It's like extra thorns. Mortar cannon, which fires grenades. So this may be the weapon swap for the Witch Hunter. So it might be worth, you know, trying to have a grenade crossbow in the offhand slot and weapon swapping to cast that. Mirage Archer sounds very cool for archers. What are they? They're spawned on dodge roll. And it's an energy gem, though I don't remember what the requirement for generating energy was. Maybe every time you dodge roll it creates energy. Maybe I should be finding screenshots of some of this stuff, but I'm not going to roll. I've just rolled so many Deadeyes and Pathfinders. I can't do another one for League Start, even though it probably makes sense to be a Deadeye. Siphon Elements allows you to create a chance to create an infusion remnant when you freeze, shock, or ignite. That's going to be pretty good, I imagine, if you're playing an infusion build. They brought Grim Feast back. Instead of granting energy shield, it allows you to collect remnants from your dead reviving minions. Okay, so it's a minion-based skill. I have no interest in minions. They do look cool. The changes look pretty cool with the way that they function, but I prefer to have a much more active playstyle. Added a new keystone passive skill in the northwest of the monk, Hollow Palm. Yeah, so this is one everyone's excited about. I was thinking about this. So it scales on the gem level, which means you have to choose between the new unique gloves, Thunder Fist, which has flat added damage, flat crit, and something else, I think. Maybe some attack speed, I can't remember. Or gloves that have plus skills, right? Because that gives you plus flat damage based on Hollow Palm. Because you can't use a quarterstaff anymore. So you're only going to be able to get plus melee skills from your neck and from your gloves for a maximum of plus 5. So I think that'll be an interesting choice. We'll have to see what the math says in terms of which gloves are better, plus skills or Thunder Fist. But Thunder Fist looks pretty cool. Ritual Cadence changes your invocations to trigger skills every 2 seconds instead of all at once, but trigger skills consume less energy. I actually don't know what that means. I've never played any of that side of the tree. I don't know what invocations are. Are they the meta skills? Perhaps. Black Flame Covenant. This keystone converts fire to chaos, with this damage contributing to ignite chance and magnitude, and ignites inflicted with fire skills dealing chaos damage. That's pretty cool. It's in the north of the tree. Converting fire to chaos is very cool. And I saw from the video, right, it makes it go purple, which is actually the best part. Turns all your fire skills purple. It's basically free MTX. Walker of the Wilds. This keystone causes mana leech to recover based on LE damage. That's also very good, obviously, to solve mana issues for Monk and Ranger. And the new currency orbs, which are just phenomenal for crafting both during the campaign. So you can just, you know, it will devalue normal exalts, but that's, I think, a good thing. So you can slam your gear, because I imagine once you get to endgame, greater will be the minimum that you'll be trading with. I don't think you'll be trading with normal exalts. So I think a basic piece of gear will probably cost, you know, 1 greater exalted orb at the start. I think perfects are going to be too rare for that. I think perfects are going to be closer to the old chaos orb. And now greater chaos orb will be probably where old chaos orb was. And then perfect chaos orb, Jonathan said in an interview with Try and Woody Joe that perfect chaos orbs are rarer than divines. So take with that what you will. Hinokora's lock. I've never played with this in PoE 1. I stopped playing PoE 1 before they added any of the locks. I saw in the video, so you apply the lock, so you have to spend it, and I imagine it's very rare. And it tells you what the next currency is going to be. So I guess what that helps you do is you have a bunch of different currencies that you can use on an item. And if you use Hinokora's lock, you can see by hovering each of those currencies over, so whether it's a chaos orb, an exalted orb, a greater exalted orb, a perfect, it would be interesting to see if you get different results, you know, from a greater, a perfect, a normal. So you can just have all of those lined up and you can pick which one you're going to do. Also be interesting if it tells you what's going to happen after you sanctify or Val an item, and whether or not it takes into account an active omen. I guess it must do, right? If the omen's active, then that's what it's going to do. So yeah, I guess this is pretty good for finishing an item. I don't know how rare or expensive these are going to be. But actually, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, what's the point in that? You know, you use the lock and you hover an exalted orb over it, and it tells you, oh, you're not going to get the result you want. Then what do? I guess you find a different piece of currency to apply to it, and apply that instead. 10 new unique items, 50 new base item types. Seems crazy. I don't know where these are coming from, right? We already have all of the end game items, the white bases. So what are these powering? Are they the new unique? Are they the missing unique bases? So we'll have more chance orb targets. are they including exceptional in these 50 new base item types? And new omens. New omens are good as long as they're affordable. And by affordable, I mean affordable for tribute. But yeah, more of them means that, you know, maybe we'll see amelioration less often in the window, and we'll see more maybe in the medium crafting omens, right? To refine your rare gear. I mean, ideally, you should be able to craft decent, like what, 5 mod items, which is enough currently to clear all the content in the game, right? If you can craft like a decent 4 mod weapon, then you can beat the whole game. You can beat T4 with a decently crafted 4 mod weapon. You don't need 6 mods. If all of your gear is 4 great mods, and then a couple of, you know, maybe one like the rest is like 50-50 between useless and maybe like, you know, less useful mods, you know. Some of them are more useful than you'd think. Like, you know, you don't always want to see mana, but actually having a bit of mana on your gear does help. Right. End game changes. Currently, most Pinnacle content requires the same key at the easiest. This incentivizes people to not run it. Obviously, I didn't have this problem in SSF, but yeah, in trade, aside from getting your points, which takes ages, then yeah, there was no point, right? Especially when the invitations and splinters were much more rare. The keys were worth just way too much to be worth running at T0. It was even like a lot of people weren't even running it to get their points, right? They were like, so, well, what's the point? I can make, you know, a few divines from just selling the invitation. Each content, excluding Arbiter, will now drop splinters. Yeah, great. I mean, they're already dropped splinters, but the way those splinters will be used, and I guess the ritual will see splinters more often rather than waiting for an audience for the king. And then each difficulty, 1 requires more splinters, and 2 from the video requires you to have beaten the previous difficulties. You still have to go up through the tiers. It would just be easier to do that. Passive trees no longer affecting difficulty is great. Having to change your passive tree every time you wanted to run a lower difficulty boss. So for instance, when I was like trying to farm Hauer, when I was trying to farm Ingenuity, I was incentivized to lower the difficulty of the boss to reduce the unique drop pool. I don't need to do that now. I can just run it at a lower difficulty if I want, if I'm doing another solo self-found project. Otherwise, I just run it at the highest difficulty because maybe then it drops better stuff. Existing stuff, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't matter. It's for standard. Arbiter of Ash is now a 2 difficulty fight with infinite portals. Interesting that Uber Arbiter sounds like Uber Arbiter is also infinite portals. You can try it as many times as you want. That's pretty good. Considering it's the endgame Pinnacle content, Uber Arbiter is quite difficult. Being able to practice it as much as you want is pretty good. And it looks like they've buffed his drops to compensate for that. I like that you have to defeat harder Citadel bosses in order to access Uber Arbiter. That's another big change for interacting with that Pinnacle content, because you're also incentivized to run a really hard map, so you had higher Waystone drop chance, but to unspec from all of your boss points to reduce the difficulty of the fight. So you add a bunch of mods, and then you just take it down to T0, and from that, well, I mean, I took it down to T1, right, because the second tier of boss mods gives you Waystone drop chance. But yeah, so now in order to access Uber Arbiter, you have to kill the Citadel bosses as on their hardest possible difficulty. It's a good change. I like it. You still have to have killed the previous Arbiter fight as well, so you run them first on their easiest difficulties, or, you know, at least with a 6 mod map. As you can see here, to get your 2 points, at least T15 6 mod map. It's interesting that it specifies 79 plus, because currently you can only access a Citadel with a T15 map. So 79 plus is inherent. We'll have to see if you can access Citadel bosses without T15s, though it doesn't appear to be a good choice to do that. how map boss points are obtained has been streamlined massively. So previously, you needed to kill, what was it, a 79, an 80, an 81, an 82, and Arbiter for your 10 points. Now you don't need to rely on the RNG of hitting a corrupted or cleansed area with irradiated and inherent +1 in order to turn your T16 level 80 map into a level 82 map. Now you only need to run a map boss on T16 with at least 6 mods, which is great. Because if the map that you've chosen to Vaal has 6 mods on it and it upgrades to T16, that's the only change that happens to it. So if you already know you can run the map, all you're doing is trying to increase the level of it. So this is really good. It will be significantly easier from at least from a random number perspective to find and get all of those boss points so that you can access Uber Arbiter. So in order to access Uber Arbiter, you only need to find 2 sets of citadels, 1 anomaly, and that's it. You find your first set of citadels, you run an anomaly, and you kill your map bosses at T15 and T16, and then you kill the Arbiter on the first difficulty. And you have all your map boss points, and you can run Uber Arbiter whenever you want. That's easier, right, than the previous method where you had to find 4 sets of citadels. It didn't matter if you found all your map boss points, but you did have to find 4 sets of citadels in order to access Uber Arbiter. I forgot to access and turn on the Burning Monolith when I first got to maps. And then on my subsequent characters continued to forget to do that. And I'm pretty sure, or at least it seemed, that you can't start spawning citadels until you've activated the monolith. However, I was already 4 screens away from the starting area. So when I activated the monolith, I then had to move, I think, another 4 screens away from where I already was for the triggering of the citadels to start happening. And it did, and then I found 2 sets, though I died before I got to the second one in logbooks. So yeah, I like this change. This is much more streamlined completing of the Atlas tree. Speaking of logbooks, Olroth Origin of the Fall no longer spawns in logbooks. So I guess this is changing to a splinter system. I didn't have much trouble spawning Olroth. I got quite lucky, I think, based on seeing other people's experiences. Out of, the 8 or so logbooks that I ran, I found 4. I found 4 Olroths. Like, it was like almost 50% spawning. So I think I got very lucky. Though it was the normal monsters in a logbook that ended up killing me. Mysterious anomalies can now appear on the Atlas. We know what those are. Those are the new bosses from the interlude that we can go and fight for unique rewards, including lineage support gems. Modifiers on Waystones have been reworked. This is really good. Now there is an incentive to roll max mods on a map instead of using omens to just roll prefixes. And it was kind of weird, right? Because actually, you kind of should have really still been running difficult maps, but the only benefit of it was adding Waystone drop chance. And so you kind of run into this issue where you're focusing on only rolling prefixes or only running like 3 mod maps, right? If you transmute a good prefix on, then you would regal it straight away, either using an omen or just flat, and then you would stop rolling the map as soon as you hit that 3 prefixes, or even you'd stop rolling the map as soon as you hit like gold chance or more magic monsters, right? And then you would like use those for traversing the maps that weren't juiced. So now it being Waystone drop chance and rarity, quantity, and pack size, which is really good. So you alch Alchemy maps, slam them with exalts. You're probably not going to be using greater exalts. You Varl them, you sell the ones you can't run, and you run the ones you can. Downside modifiers have been made weaker to account for the ability to have more present than before. This is pretty good. Some of them are very harsh. The fact that they've been toned down a bit means that, because you're going to have a selection of mods on a map where some of them are completely irrelevant to you, right? If you're Chaos Inoculation, you want to see stuff like, mobs poison you or bleed you or do extra damage as Chaos or things like that. And so the fact that the others have been toned down, when you're rolling a 6-mod map, you get a couple of free mods and maybe like 4 toned down mods. It's pretty good to me. I guess what we've lost, though, is more things like more rare monsters. Rare monsters have an additional modifier. I think I don't know if I don't remember if I saw whether or not increased gold is on there. I think it is. So I think it's quant, rarity, gold, pack size, right? Are the 4 benefits to the various mods. Be interesting to see like how much rarity or quant or whatever it is the really annoying bad modifiers give you. Like whether you still want to run temp chains, right? Or, sell it to a pathfinder or a strength user who can use time of need, stuff like that. Unidentified corrupted waystones can now be used to access corrupted nexus. I assume this was a bug. And actually what's happened here is just that you couldn't use them before and not this is now the only way to access a corrupted nexus. Waystones can no longer have greater than 8 modifiers when corrupted. This makes sense with this change because every modifier now impacts the juice. Exceptional items can now drop that have extra sockets or extra quality. This is really cool, especially with the crafting changes. Just, especially in Trade League, finding bases worth crafting on. You're probably not going to be wanting to pick up like every blue and every white, but you want to pick up every exceptional base, either sell them to a crafter or try and craft it yourself. They've renamed the Abyss map to Marrow. Yeah, I guess so people don't get confused because the Abyss is everywhere. They've updated the Expedition Notable to provide a +1 level of logbooks found on your maps. I guess this is because one of the previous mechanisms was that if you found level 79 logbooks that you wanted, but now Olroth can't spawn in them. I don't know what the point of this is. I guess it's just a bit of juice. So instead of more logbooks, you find higher level logbooks. But if Olroth can't spawn in the logbooks, I guess they're just going to be for loot. Are they adding experience back into logbooks if the boss can't spawn there? Like, what is the pinnacle? Which of the 2 mechanisms of expedition is now the pinnacle? Is it the logbook itself, running level 82 logbooks? In which case, you should get experience. I guess, were you getting experience in logbooks? I actually don't remember. Maybe you did. Maybe it was just the Olroth encounter itself that you didn't. I don't know. The He Approaches Ritual Notable passive skill now causes an increased chance of monsters to be magic. Yeah, and you can have no longer causes ritual favors in your maps to have 30%. I wonder if how much tribute you generate impacts how many splinters can spawn, or if I didn't want the one that revives things as rare before, I don't think, without having something like more omens or more audiences. Essence have been reworked. Lesser normal, greater and perfect, and they are deterministic, which is again really good for campaign, really good for endgame. Hysteria, what was it? There's torment, hysteria. I can't remember the one I found. I did find one of these corrupted essences in my hardcore playthrough, but I never felt like using it. It was the one that adds a notable to a chest. I guess now it can apply to any item. The question is it greater essences that can upgrade into corrupted essences, or is it only perfect? Because perfect sound like they're going to be very rare, which makes, if that's true, makes these even rarer. We'll have to see how they balance essence spawning. Be worth checking out one of the streamers that runs, hundreds of Mac mechanics to see how they, how that impacts. How often are you seeing normal, greater, perfects? Minimac icons for unique strongboxes. Delwyn is no longer being annoying. Asmiri spirits appear later. That's fine. Yeah, it appearing in Grelwood on League Start was scary sometimes. You can get more gold for your skill gems. Cool. Hooded one can't be placed in your hideout. Didn't know that you could. I've never played in a party. You are now able to log directly into town or hideout by holding control while selecting a character. So I guess this means you can get around the logout timer in hardcore. So currently, if you need to log out in hardcore, you need to wait 15 minutes for the instance to reset because there's no longer a respawn at checkpoint. You no longer can do that if you pause the game and logged out. So I guess this allows you to log straight back in. It was kind of stupid that you can log out of danger, but then you have to wait 15 minutes to play again. So this is good. Checkpoints can now also warp to waypoints. This is actually a pretty good change for the campaign, for doing it faster. The fact that you can use a checkpoint to warp to a waypoint as well is good, because there are a couple of areas where the checkpoint is the closest thing to the thing you want to get to. Omens can now stack. Well, I ended up buying a ritual tab, so that doesn't matter. Ooh, Orb of Chance has new art. Cool. You can now buy skill, support, and reservation gems through the currency exchange. This is really good for when you want low-level spirit gems. Don't think it matters so much for skill gems because of the change they're making to disincentivize you from using lower level skill gems against higher monsters. Normally, a lower level skill gem that you want to use will be because you want to inflict a status. Now they are changing the way statuses work, so the lower the level versus the monster level, the less likely it is to inflict that status. I guess if you're low on support gems, then being able to just buy some very quickly from the currency exchange makes sense. I guess this is just a small quality of life of change, and I guess they don't want people just like filling their merchant tabs with skill gems. Party members can no longer fruitlessly attempt to open expedition portals. Never played in a party. NVIDIA Reflex has been re-enabled. I don't know if that's a good thing. They have added sprint to the game. So yeah, sprint looks awesome. Risk reward when using it in combat or in bosses, right? Imagine using sprint to avoid the hand slam on Zesht. It's very risk reward because he might also be casting hands or the projectiles. You can, with decent move speed in a well-timed roll, you can avoid the hand slam, but maybe you want to try and sprint out of the way. Otherwise, backtracking, early game, skipping through areas. This is just a really good change. You can't socket multiple copies of the same skill gem into your main skill sockets. I never did this. I know there were a couple of strategies with things like multiple Tempest spells. But yeah, I think this is a fine change, right? They want you to combo different abilities together, not spam the same one like Tempest Spell on top of an enemy. That was never intended. Attribute requirements on equipment and skill gems have been reduced by 20 to 25%. This is really good for hybrid characters my crossbow build really struggled with gem and gear requirements because I needed all 3 attributes. Balancing them was an absolute headache. Having to find it on my gear, having to like respec my tree to like change pieces of gear out. 25% less would have made my life significantly easier. It would have freed up, I would say, at least 2 suffix slots, which would give me a lot more freedom on balancing resists because I wouldn't need as many attributes. Yeah, this is a really good change. Fire damage no longer inherently has a chance to ignite. So I never found ignite particularly good. I was using incendiary shot. I tried to make it ignite. Well, maybe this was why. It just didn't do enough damage. So I switched to explosive grenade and used my incendiary shot to explode it. I think if there's enough new abilities that interact with ignite, then this might be quite fun for clear. Spreading ignites to clear on my new crossbow build might be viable, and then using, you know, the heavy hitting physical plus shotgun type attacks for bosses. Yeah, this might work really well. And then just more stuff on flammability. These changes do not affect how Ignite itself functions or is calculated once it has been applied. So I guess that means it's still just every ailment that does damage is still just based on the hit that applies it. Which means they're all going to feel the same still, right? Poison and Ignite are going to feel the same. They're not going to feel any different. These changes also apply to non-fire damage, so if you've converted to Chaos, for instance, shock is now 8 seconds. This is cool, you know, shock burst rounds. Though they've nerfed the damage a little bit, I don't think the damage nerf is going to do too much to it, right? It's like 10 or 15%. It's still really powerful, so having a longer shock base is going to be good. Chill, I think this only matters because they've now added way more ways to interact with chill. I don't think anyone was using chill before, but 4 times as long means if you do have a way to interact with it, then you're going to be much happier. Though this is just new. This is just a new mechanic as far as I'm concerned. Overflow effects on life, mana, and energy shield can now overflow by up to 1.5 times instead of 2 times. I don't know what this affects. Will this affect blood mage's life remnants? So it's a nerf to blood rage? Blood mage? Could be. Could be a nerf to the amount of health you can generate on blood mage. Light stun effects. I've never really interacted with this stun. Ellie exposure is less effective on bosses by a considerable amount. So you'll have to invest in it more if you want it to be good. Your fists have a base crit chance. Of course they do. Glory now decays if you haven't gained any for 15 seconds. So I don't know if they've made glory easier to generate. I've never used glory. But this is quite a significant nerf, I guess. If you haven't generated any for 15 seconds instead of 30, so it's half. Yeah, I don't know how impactful that's going to be for things like banners. What else uses glory? I guess the big like finishers and like spears and mace tree use glory. I don't know if there's a crossbow skill. Does cluster grenade use glory? Actually, let's Google this in another. Oh, not doing very well in privacy. Okay, cluster grenade, PoE 2. What's it doing? Oh, apparently I just activated the patch. New supporter packs. Oh, cool. Gonna be buying those. One of them. So, does cluster grenade use glory? No, it doesn't, right? And that's the big finisher. Do any of the mercenary skills? Crossbow gems. Here we go. What might Siege Cascade? Is that the one that uses glory? No, it doesn't seem to. Payoff. It is a payoff skill. Payoff against immobilized enemies. Enemies. Yeah, I don't think any of the crossbow skills use glory. I guess it's a melee thing, I guess. Or I guess banners use them. I guess that's technically a crossbow skill. Okay. Oil ground duration is refreshed when it catches fire. That's good. I think I tried to use oil grenade for a bit and ended up not really liking how low the duration was. So refreshing when you set it on fire might be pretty good for a fire build. Well, the only instances of guard I ever found were like the 150 you got from charms. So I don't know if this is going to be impactful. Ice crystals now instantly shatter from hits that can consume freeze. So if you're doing like ice, crossbow, or bow, then you shatter automatically. Added a new mechanic called Elemental Infusion. Yeah, this seems really cool. Like the video footage of the sorceress casting like a firestorm with like all 3 types of element was really cool. That would be if I wasn't rolling crossbow, I think I would run a roll Stormweaver. I played sorcerer back in Diablo 1, Chain Lightning. I played some sorceress in Diablo 2. Yeah, I really like the look and the sound of, you know, this kind of like melding of all of the elements into the spell trees now. And hopefully when they release Druid in the next patch, the Spellcaster Druid has a similar kind of infusion mechanic with their spells, right? Like volcanoes and tornadoes, things like that. Snowstorms. We'll see. And they've renamed some stuff to reduce confusion between infusion, and they've changed things to surges. Reloading a crossbow and switching ammunition no longer reduces the player movement speed. Yeah. I think this is a really good change. Reloading, though, is still, as much as I love the feel of playing crossbow, and I love the feel that you're using different types of guns, right? That's effectively what they are, right? They're fantasy guns because you have the single shot sniper guns, you have the 1 or 2 shot shotguns, and then you have like the machine gun abilities. And the fact that you need to load those clips in, I think actually adds to the feel of playing that. Like I feel like I'm playing a gun build. The problem is it only feels good when you're playing a Deadeye and you have maximum tailwind stacks. So the reload speed, I think, needs to come down to, by default, that full tailwind stack speed. Maybe with some tree investment, I don't know. And then have skill speed or weapon speed just not affect it. And just have it consistent, that it's quick, that you have to do it, but that it's low impact. One of the other good things about reloading, and I was watching Mizo earlier, and I think he made some good points, right? Like, it's the only weapon that has this kind of downside, but there are some upsides to it. So you only spend mana when you reload. And so if the way that they've set up the new skills incentivizes you to use 2 or 3 crossbow skills, right? You know, your status applier, your status consumer, and then your damage skill. You don't have to spend any mana until you have used that full rotation and you want to reload them. And then you have emergency reload has been buffed. We'll come to that in a bit, which now reloads all of them. So you could run through your rotation, you know, switch, which will hopefully be much quicker. Switching ammunition, I think, is going to be much quicker, and it's not reducing your movement speed. And then emergency reload and run your rotation again, and then you spend your mana to reload the crossbows. So that is one of the benefits, right? You're sort of delaying your mana use. I never really ran into any mana issues. The only mana issue I ran into on my crossbow build was the fact that my conductivity curse cost 3/4 of my mana pool. So we'll see. Blocking is no longer limited to strikes and projectiles. All hits that are not specifically unblockable with a red flash can be blocked. Can't say I've ever noticed the red flash. Maybe they've added it. But yeah, I think this applies to passive and active block, right? Passive being chance to block, active block being you will block it. As a result, the raise, shield, and parry require you to face the enemy that's hitting you rather than the direction from the so you have to be facing where the damage is coming from enemy-wise, but not where the damage is coming from skill-wise. And they've reduced block chance to account for this because block blocks all damage, right? So if you can block everything, that's effectively maximum block is 50%. Be interesting to see, I guess, they'll have to have toned down. Yeah, they have toned down. I mean, I read this earlier. They've toned down the sources of additional block value, right, to be in line. So however easy it was to get to 75% before, it's the same amount. They've reduced sources of block chance by, I don't know if they've reduced it by 30%. I guess we'll have to have a look. It might be slightly easier to hit 50% now than it was to hit 75. I don't know what volatility does. Increase player accuracy per level and per point of dex, I think is good. Didn't really enjoy having to solve for accuracy in the end game for damage. It's maybe, you know, if you're heavily invested in dex now, you don't need to solve for it at all. If you're hybrid, you do. The accuracy fall-off penalty now linearly interpolates from 2 meters down to 12 meters. Maximum penalty being 90, whereas it used to be 100% less. So I didn't know that you had 0 accuracy at 14 meters. I don't know how far more 14 meters is. Is that the total distance of the screen? Or is it just off screen? Though to be honest, the things that are killing off screen aren't usually the projectiles themselves. They are the effects that you are generating from those projectiles. So I don't know how much of a difference this is going to make. Minions now don't need to worry about accuracy. This, I think, is a buff for everyone because it reduces the number of mods that affect minion accuracy on like duels and stuff. There's like 1 less mod on the duels that can roll that on Sapphires. So, yeah. Projectiles always fire 1, even if they should fire 0. I don't know how you would get that. Weapon swap is now instant. Brilliant. Yeah. Having to think about investing in weapon swap speed in order to be able to do the thing they wanted you to do was not good. All charge consuming skills now pause their corresponding charges duration while in use. All charge consuming skills now pause their charges duration while in use. So if you have 3 frenzy charges that have 10 seconds left, you use 1. While your skill is active that used that skill, that 10-second timer for the other 2 is not ticking down. I imagine that means, so that's a slight buff. Tooltip change. Clarified stun keyword. These are just tooltip changes. Tooltip change. Tooltip change. Right, ascendancies. Never played a Warbringer. I don't like totems. However, the Warcry stuff sounds really cool. The fact that stacks of Jade are no longer lost, so you just have a straight, like it's a mix of Warcries, totems, and pretty good defensive buffs, which I think is it's a really well balanced ascendancy. I think we'll have to see how strong the Warcry stuff and the block stuff is going forward. But I think a combination of like Turtle Charm and Jade makes a really tanky character. They have removed the 5% max fire res from Smith of Katava, which probably makes sense, right? And this might even be a buff. So we'll have to see if 35% of armor to elemental damage is better than the 5 max fire res that then, you know, it's converted into all res. So this is all res, right? Effectively. We'll have to see. It applies armor applies to elemental damage. I think they said before resistances. So we'll have to see. Less sources of fire res. Increased strength in the small passive instead of minions deal 20% increased damage. I think is that's quite a nice change. That makes this small passive really useful. The manifest weapon skill granted by living weapon no longer grants minions from this skill have increased accuracy because they can never miss now. Instead they get attack speed. So that's just a flat buff to a living weapon. If it was good before, I don't know. I never played it. Okay, Gemling. Did I play a Gemling? I think I tried to roll. I rolled a Gemling at the end of 0.1 just to kind of see what the big deal was about Gemling with Pillar of the Cage Gods stat stacking, because I had quite a decent amount of like attribute gear. That was the only interaction I've had with Gemlin, and I didn't really enjoy it actually that much. I didn't play it for very long. Though it was quite funny spinning around the map with Tempest Flurry. So now it increases charge generation. So you can just generate, it looks like random charges every 8 seconds, which isn't very long. But, you know, maybe if you have a build that, you know, uses a bunch of charges to kill stuff. I think they really want Gemling to be the true hybrid class. It seems like, right? So you could have finishers that use endurance charges, frenzy charges, and power charges, and you can just run around being defensive while they generate and then unload them all on a boss, something like that. Otherwise, it doesn't seem reliable enough if you're using that stuff for clearing. And your highest stat, your highest stat makes it more likely you'll generate that charge. Okay, so what happens if they're perfectly balanced? Well, if you have exactly the same amount of each, you know, we'll see. Maybe there's some cool builds that will come out of this that just use finishers. Just use charge consumers. Maybe this buff, you can probably put fast forward on it. So maybe you can generate charges quicker. Maybe there's some interactions where when you generate one charge, you generate more. We'll have to see. There might be some, I imagine there'll be some really cool builds coming out of Gemlin based on charges. Gem studded, notable passive. Can't be crit. Skills cost 30% less. More move speed while using skills. These are all interesting for different reasons. I guess if you are primarily strength, then you will have a smaller life pool. So having no crits against you is pretty good. It also makes things like crit mods on Trial of Chaos and Waystones free. If you are blue, then you're probably a spellcaster. So 30% less mana cost is a free Ingenuity, which I think has been renamed. And if you are Dex, then you are likely to be bow or crossbow. And so having less move speed makes you zoom more, which is very Dex. Yeah, this is pretty thematic. Actually quite like this. That's pretty cool. I don't know what red you would be. Maybe there's going to be a melee gemling. That'd be pretty cool. Okay, Tactician. I didn't even look at this last patch, you know. The banners and the artillery and stuff just didn't seem that interesting. And I'm not going to look at it again now. Am I? Okay, no, I'm going to have a look at it. Summon totems, don't care. It looks like they've rolled projectile damage pins into another node. Let's have a look. What does this node do at the moment? No. Oh. What does it do? Right where we want them. Pinned enemies cannot perform actions. So they've rolled suppressing fire into right where we want them, and they've changed suppressing fire to give more immobilization buildup. Is immobilization different to pin? I don't know. The supporting fire skill granted by Unleash Hell, which is the grants the skill that recruit artillery minions that take up positions behind you. They will lay in wait for your command and then fire volleys of arrows at the target location. It no longer grants minions. Oh, okay. They always hit. Wow, they could miss before. Yeah, that's not what you want, right? From a ascendancy notable. Bunch of minions that could miss the target. And then a bunch of banner stuff. Oh, and you can grant totems, which includes ballistas and mortar cannon. Embankment auras. I guess this is a range, like a banner. I've not heard the term embankment before. But I imagine this is a radius by which you can gain this ability. So if we wanted to go, you know, crossbow plus mortar cannon, you can get a 50% more damage as fire. It's also interesting that it affects like Dark Effigy. Increased damage over time. Probably be better if there was a more multiplier. Siege Ballista, 15 damage against immobilized energy. 50% increased damage against immobilized energies. I keep calling them energies. Alright. Anyway, I don't think I'm playing Tactician. I like Witch Hunter. Maybe Gemling. They have changed Ritualist. And they've rolled the notable that grants. So, as the Whispers ask, all it did was allow you to sacrifice a corpse of a rare monster to grant its modifiers for 20 seconds. I don't know if any Ritualists were using this. I don't think they were. They've now rolled it into As the Whispers Demand, which allows you to use it on yourself to grant a random monster modifier. But only one. That still doesn't sound very good. I think if you're rolling Ritualist, you're going to be really focused on the ring buffs and then maybe always having charms active. Or life recovery rate. Yeah. Yeah. Do they? Thank you. Very valuable. All right. Pathfinder. Welcome to my reading session. I hope you enjoy. The Sustainable Practices Notable passive skill now grants 50% evasion rating and also grants elemental damage reduction. So this was, I guess, in principle, the same change they've made to the armor, right? You could take this node and it would grant a percentage of your evasion rating as damage reduction against elemental damage. The problem was with it, it felt completely meaningless because it applied before resistances. So the damage reduction wasn't noticeable at all. Maybe it will be now at 50%. And it's behind the really useful node that grants you immunity to slows or ignite, which is good against Arbiter. Freeze, which if you have enough ailment threshold, which actually it turns out isn't that hard to get on that side of the tree, especially if you're using energy shield. I never had a problem with freeze. So, yeah, I don't know if this is still worth taking. They have reworked concoctions again. Concoctions are now payoffs. So they now consume the thing that they were inflicting before. So you can explode your poisons with Poison Concoction Flask, which is pretty cool. I actually quite like the sound of that. And you don't need to worry about the fact that if it doesn't interact with Herald of... What's the Herald that does poison? Forgotten the name. Herald of Plague. Because it consumes the poison to explode the enemies, you don't need to worry about spreading it with an unarmed skill. You do need a weapon swap into unarmed to cast this, I imagine. They've not mentioned that they've removed the unarmed requirement. Maybe they will now. Yeah, I'm glad I've alleviated your concerns, Cola. Fulminating Concoction no longer inflicts exposure, but now has 50% more shock effect. With shock lasting longer, right, this is probably maybe a decent option if you're a Pathfinder lightning build. Shattering now inflicts exposure. So they've moved the exposure onto Shattering, and it grants elemental exposure against all types. And freezes enemies that are primed for freeze. I assume primed for freeze just means chilled to a certain percentage. Bleeding Concoction aggravates bleed. This is, I played Bleed Pathfinder as my league start. No, not that kind of exposure, Cola. Much more family-friendly exposure. Yeah, I think having a bleed... maybe I would have played Bleeding Concoction. That's well, that makes one of us. Yeah, maybe I would have played Bleeding Concoction if it was the aggravator for Pathfinder, for my Rake build. Explosive Concoction has 200% more magnitude of ignite. And no longer inflicts fire exposure. You need to use... Well, you can only use one concoction at a time. So if you want to expose your enemies, then you'll need to find another way if you're using anything except Shattering. It no longer has 200% more ignite. So it doesn't ignite anymore. So it's a payoff skill. So if you've ignited a bunch of enemies, you can throw your explosive concoction at it and blow them all up. Which is pretty cool. I don't know if they've saved concoctions. I think this we'll need to see if there's been any other rework to the number of charges it uses, things like that. It doesn't seem like there's any other changes to Pathfinder. Deadeye has been buffed. Now you can get crit. So instead of removing distance-based accuracy penalties, you get crit weakness when you consume a mark. I don't know which skills consume marks. But yeah, I'm not sure. I don't remember considering using any skills that consume them. I've never really interacted with it. I think people are still just going to take Tailwind and Extra Proj. Cooking and needlework. I don't. Invoker is obviously going to be the unarmed league start for most people. Elemental Expression, the fact that you get, if you're taking Hollow Palm, which gives you benefits from Evasion and Energy Shield, and you're getting Spirit from Evasion and Energy Shield. They've also buffed Meditate, it seems. So yeah, I mean, Invoker was good before, and is going to be good now. Acolyte of Cholula, a lot of changes. Not Cholula, that's a hot sauce. Chayula. Basically, we get more chaos damage. You can leech from chaos. It seems they've removed instant leech. They've tried to rework darkness. This, I don't think we can predict what this is going to look like. I'm going to have to play with it. Blood Mage. Sanguimancy is now free, and there is no longer a small life passive skill before it. This is great. This was the only ascendancy in the game that when you ascended, you got weaker. Now you get stronger because you get Sanguimancy and the first 2 points. It looks like they've slightly nerfed crit damage bonus, but they've nerfed crit damage bonus across the board. There are less sources of crit damage bonus now. I think to tone down the focus on crit being one of the only ways to scale damage in the game. Hopefully all of the other buffs are enough to make up for that. Critical hits no longer ignore monster armor. Instead, you get life charge flasks. Life flask charges back per life spent. And 50% less life recovery from flasks. Okay, I'm not sure what the point of this is. Now when your life flask reaches full charges, 40% of its charges are consumed. And you gain damage by refilling your life flasks. So effectively, it wants you to stop using your life flasks and instead, or you use them, they're less effective, you refill the charges, and then you gain a bunch of physical damage for 3 seconds, for 3 seconds per charge consumed this way. That's a pretty short buff. And noticing when it goes off, it's probably going to be quite difficult. The Open Sore's notable passive skill has been renamed. It no longer grants infinite duration curses. Now it grants enemies affected by your curses have at least 15% of... So it just reduces the total life of an enemy by 15%. If this affects bosses as well, might be a good boss node. I don't think it really matters for mapping. I never played Infernalist. Though Demon Form sounded fun before, and now it sounds even more fun. Because you get to keep your weapon buff. So I imagine this is a buff, right? And they keep mentioning that quality now provides quality on added skills provides effects. So hopefully that means you can now Gemcutter's Prism, the abilities you get from your ascendancies, which you couldn't before. Leech. It looks like Infinite Curses has been moved from Blood Mage to Leech. And now leeches can't curse hexproof enemies. Energies. This is a lot of talking. My mouth's getting tired. They've removed the specification of non-channeling spells. So the leech can now use its energy shield spending mechanism on channeled spells and non-channeled spells. for both the power charge and the energy shield mechanism. Chronomancer, I never played Chronomancer or really looked into it. So it looks like you can store damage in a curse called Inevitable Agony, and then it deals a portion of that damage again when the debuff expires. It doesn't say what the base length of the debuff is. Hopefully it's quite short, or this is just for bosses. Quicksand Hourglass no longer grants 50% more cast speed every 10 seconds for 5 seconds. It now grants Sands of Time, which grants a flat 60% cast speed that reduces down to 1% over 10 seconds and then scales back up to 60%. So you have this like constantly refilling and emptying buff. That's pretty cool effect. Also grants increased area of effect, scaling up and down. So when you have maximum cast speed, you have no increased effect, and when you have maximum increased area of effect, you have no increased cast speed. Yeah, it might be quite interesting. Or annoying. You know, you're about to kill that big pack, and then turns out your area of effect is down to minimum. Stormweaver, this is one of my other options for League Start if I want to go spells. I really like the sound of mixing all of these elements and using the infusions and just like filling the screen with like loads of really cool effects. If I don't go crossbows, I'm going to go Stormweaver. You can have +1 limit on elemental skills, so that's like Solar Orb, Orb of Storms, things like that have a limit. They've also been changed. We can have a look at that in the skill changes. Scouring Winds no longer grants exposure. It now grants remnants. Reappear, right? So this is a double back mechanic because you have to pick the remnants up off the floor, which is fine for bosses but not for mapping. And then Heart of the Storm gives you a 40% chance to get an extra remnant of a different type, which is really cool. Yeah. So you can just fill the screen with infused spells, which sounds really fun. Elemental Equilibrium, what does it currently do? It's the rotating buff, right? Oh no, Elemental Equilibrium has a rotating, if you deal fire damage, you inflict lightning exposure. If you do cold damage, you inflict fire exposure. Lightning damage, you inflict cold exposure and remove the corresponding type. Now, it causes infusion remnants to be random elements. I don't know why you would ever take this. It doesn't really do anything now. Because why would you want the random element? You're probably built around the fact that you're using certain skills. I think they've missed a line on this. The Eternal Youth Keystone no longer causes your life flasks to recover energy shield. Instead, and now causes your life flasks to have 50% less recovery. So if you take this, your life flasks get worse. The end. They've definitely missed a line here. Giant's Blood now penalizes you by halving the life granted by the strength you have stacked in order to be able to use it. I'm not sure if this was necessary, but maybe it was. I don't think life builds had it that good. I mean, they were strong, right? But now halving the amount you get from stacking all that strength so that you can wield the two-hander in a one hand. Glancing Blows changes evade to unlucky and deflect to lucky. Interesting. Glancing Blows in its previous state, the block chance doubled, but you take 50% was useful in some cases. Maybe chance to deflect similarly will be useful. But you kind of want if you're stacking chance to deflect, then you kind of want to combine it with evasion, right? So I don't know if this will ever get taken. Resolute Technique has been nerfed. Accuracy rating is doubled instead of your hits cannot be evaded. Yeah. I don't know why they've changed that either. It wasn't that strong, right? I thought the downside to Resolute Technique was that you cannot crit anymore. If they've removed you cannot crit anymore, then this is, maybe it's a buff. Yeah, never deal critical hits. If that's still on there, then this is just a nerf, I think, for some reason. They've added an enormous amount of new clusters that we don't know anything about apart from the little preview we got. But it seems like they've specialized various areas of the tree from the what they showed us, right? So if you're in the east side of the tree, like pure east, then you're fire. If you're if you're on the west side of the tree, the left of the tree, you're fire. If you're on the right-hand side of the tree, you are ice. So you have the ranger and the warrior being fire and ice. And then various levels of mixing of lightning between those on the north and south side. I think that's how they're doing it. Maybe there'll be some... west side is the best. Yes, bruv. You get me. East side is the best. I'm going to be going west side. So, yeah, you're right, actually. My crossbow build, I think, will be southwest. Sources of increased area of effect have been lowered by 25%. Seems unnecessary. Days build-up has been replaced with chance to days on hit. I don't know if days... Apparently days was useless before. I didn't even know it was in the game. They've renamed reduced reservation of skills into reservation efficiency. Fine, that's basically a tooltip change. I think just big changes to the passive tree. I'm hoping what this change means is that as you're navigating through the passive tree, you can find lots of things that are useful for your build without needing to travel. So we will see. They have buffed all skills. South by Southwest is the best. Oh, okay. That's fine. I didn't want to be in the gang anyway. I'm going to start my own gang. South by Southwest. Yeah, base damage scaling of all spell and secondary damage skills has been scaled so that it's better at level 20 and even better at higher gem levels, and the mana cost at those gem levels has been reduced. Will do. I'll hand them to Big Dave. This just makes plus skills even more important. Like I was saying earlier with the unarmed, right? When you have to choose between like a really cool unique or just plus, is it 2 skills on gloves you can get? Maybe it's plus 3. I think it's just 2, isn't it? Items, modifiers. Oh no, I need to go to modifiers. Let's double check this. Gloves. Plus melee skills, it's 2. So you can choose between plus 2 melee skills or the really cool effect. I don't know. I think they're going to take another look at plus levels and how important they are. I guess you don't need them. I only had +1 on my crossbow build, and I was still able to do endgame content by just having good prefixes. Yeah, maybe... I guess on weapons, having +7 skills doesn't make up for having poor prefixes. So maybe filling out your prefixes and then using like veiled mods to try and hit plus skills is going to be the strategy to be able to do that. But yeah, we'll see. Banners, I have no interest in using. Okay, here's one of the changes they made to using lower level skills. So you now can't apply debuffs with lower level curses on higher level enemies. But if they've nerfed the mana cost, I think that's fine. That was one of the issues with the curses. They were really expensive. They have nerfed weapon swap on Blink, Convalescence, and Sacrifice. This probably makes sense. I was using Convalescence for free, basically, because I just had it on my offhand. So I just switched, used the Convalescence buff, and it didn't like reset the cooldown or anything when I switched weapons. Curses have less effect on bosses and rares. This was something they talked about in the video yesterday in the live stream. Apparently all movement from skills like run and gun type movement will feel a lot better now as you accelerate out of the action much quicker. So I think this is another reason I want to see how crossbows feel. Minions I don't care about. Instant skills are now usable on the row amount, sure. Mark skills are no longer spells. I don't know what that impacts. Maybe you can't use faster casting on marks now, which I did have. Unarmed skills now deal damage based on your equipped quarterstaff, unless you're using Hollow Palm. That makes sense. Totems I don't care about. They've buffed the skills that you get from wands and staves. I think they want you to be using those as part of the rotation. So hopefully they've made them more useful now. And the fact they can roll up to level 20. Totem, Ancestral Warrior Totem requires 3 endurance charges to raise. I mean, it did look pretty cool. If you like totems, I think that'd be a cool build. Arc is now a projectile. Another reason I kind of want to roll a sorceress to get that chain lightning feeling from Diablo 1. But I've been playing so many lightning builds. I think I want to try something else. They've minor buffed Archmage back up a little bit. But they nerfed sources of added mana. Maybe that's why they've buffed it a little bit more, but they're being very conservative with that buff. We'll see how it pans out. Ballistas have been renamed. Ball Lightning can now consume fire infusion to explode at the end of its travel and leave ignited ground. Pretty cool. Batter Shout, I imagine, is a war cry, which I don't know anything about. Berserk no longer grants life leech per rage, but it does have life. It does leech life from you per rage. Berserk. So now you can't solve the health loss. Lose 0.1% of maximum life per rage per second while you're not losing rage or while you're gaining rage. So now you'll need to find another source of life leech. You can't get it from the gem itself. And it grants more rage effect. So you're getting more damage for that trade-off. But you don't get the offset of the life loss. Spectre, Blink no longer counts as dodge rolling. But they've lowered the level requirement of it. But you still need 60 spirit. So, right? It's a 60 spirit reservation. You can't, which means you can't use this until you've done Act 3 anyway. So lowering the level requirement, I don't know how much that does. I guess you can find spirit on your armor. Yeah, 60 spirit. Yeah. Not getting gravy with my fried chicken order causes me rage. Infinite rage. Bone Offering is a minion-based skill. Don't know anything about that. Don't know anything about Bone Shatter, but it does more damage against bosses, which is cool, I guess. I think Bone Shatter was one of the boss killer abilities already, so they've buffed it even more. They've changed the meta gem cast on Freeze Shock and Ignite to a single gem. It requires 100 spirit. But if you're like the sorceress that's casting all 3 elements, maybe this fills up a lot quicker, which would be pretty cool. And they've reduced the mana cost of high level skills, so you won't have your mana bar emptied the moment this triggers. Chaos Bolt granted by Withered Wand now grants stacks of Withered, which is pretty cool. That makes this, I guess, a useful wand attack. It's free, remember, when it's attached to a wand. Cluster Grenade has been buffed damage-wise by a fair amount. Fires more grenades. The grenades do more damage but are spread out more. Yeah, I'm thinking I might try grenades again. Grenades, crossbow, might be fun. Cold Snap is now just snap. And it can chain on enemies that have the ailment type. This is pretty cool. So you could like ignite a bunch of enemies and then snap them and they all explode. I like the idea of that. Comet has been buffed slightly. A decent amount. And can be fire infused. And with the mana cost, yeah. I mean, triggering comets was already quite popular. Quality now makes contagion spread more instead of changing the damage bonus from spreading. Sure. Banner, don't care about. Despair now massively reduces chaos resistance even more. They haven't mentioned conductivity, right? I guess Ellie weakness. Is elemental weakness here? They've not mentioned elemental weakness, right? Which is the combination of the 3 elemental curses into one. They mentioned that in the live stream, but that's not here. I wonder if they've also been changed to give more resistance, less resistance, to reduce resistance more. Disengage now has a chance for an additional shockwave. I think they showed some of this disengage gameplay, right? Where you can, if you disengage on an enemy that's dazed, it increases the effect of the daze to provide increased damage taken. So this might actually be useful. Earthquake, which I used once and then never again because of how long it takes to cast. Like you cast it and then you wait 3 business days and then it attacks the enemies. They've reduced the radius and they've increased the damage. Sure, if you can increase the cast speed, that would be great. Earth Shatter grants more damage for each spike. No, you don't want to cast it at weekends. You want to get in really early on Monday morning, cast your Earthquake, get on with your life, and then come back to see if all of the monsters are dead. Electrocuting Arrow seems pretty cool now. Just as a direct source of electrocution for crowd control. It's pretty cool. Emergency Reload, as I mentioned earlier, now reloads all of your crossbow clips and empowers the bolts for its duration or until you expend the empowered bolts. Whichever comes first. Doesn't say what the duration is. I can't remember if it was 4 seconds or... Let's have a look. 6 seconds. But it empowers all of your crossbow clips. I never understood actually with emergency reload if the crossbow needed to be empty to get the empowered effect or if it just empowered them. I'm hoping the latter. Enfeeble has been nerfed on bosses. Oh, sorry, no, it's been buffed. It's been buffed. Instead of 20 to 26 on non-uniques and 10 to 16 on uniques, it's just a flat 21 to 29 on everything. That's pretty good. I guess if you want to tank the pinnacle content, this makes it a bit easier if you want to use that curse. Escape shot. I never really enjoyed using these like escape shot style abilities that make you leap back really far. Mostly because it didn't feel like it was actually making me dodge anything. I would still get hit while I was leaping through the air. I don't know if they changed that. Explosive Spear I never played with. Eye of Winter. Eye of Winter, I guess before didn't empower the shards with the flame wall damage, and now it does. So another reason to mix elements. Fangs of Frost. I don't even remember what that skill does. Fireball. Here we go. Everyone's favorite fire ability. No longer creates secondary firebolt projectiles by default. Instead, it needs a fire infusion to do so. They've lowered the minimum gen level, so you can start earlier with it. They've increased the damage at the bottom and the top end by quite a bit. And the secondary projectiles that you need to infuse to cast. And it can shotgun with the secondaries. Yeah, sounds fun. If you want to go pure fire caster, just do fire infusions and fireball stuff. Seems like it's viable. You can shotgun bosses or you can clear packs. Firestorm is the really cool one that we saw in the video that allows you to infuse it with cold and lightning and just rain down everything. Flame Wall can be empowered with lightning infusion to empower projectiles with lightning and fire. It now can crit. And then I think they also said that it will not ignite. If you use a low level flame wall, it won't ignite enemies who are high level. Oh, here we go. Okay, they've not mentioned the range of resistance penalty on elemental weakness. Maybe it's the same as before. What was it, like 40 odd % at max level? Explosion from frozen enemies on fragmentation rounds now converts all fizz to cold. Explosion radius is up to 2 meters from 1.8 and does more damage against unique enemies. Yeah. If you're doing ice crossbow, that's a buff. Frost bomb now causes general exposure and chill, but still takes forever to go off. So I don't think I'd be using it in mapping. Frost Wall now has a delay before it can deal full damage. Frostbolt projectile speed has been lowered. No longer leaves chilled grounds. It said it chills on impact. Okay. Galvanic shards. So the build I played this league in Hardcore Solo Self-Found. It no longer has less reload speed. I didn't notice that it had, but that's because I'm playing Deadeye. And now has 1 bolt loaded per clip, previously 5. Damage has been buffed. Relatively high. Fires more fragments. Has a lower mana cost. And quality provides more fragments instead of more bolts. So this makes this, I guess, more difficult to use as a general clear skill. Maybe for mapping, right? Because you you have a quite slow time to kill while you're leveling through the campaign anyway. I think the intention here is that each of the 3 elements and physical have a sniper type ability or a big big single use ability, a shotgun, multiple projectile fragment ability, and then like a machine gun type ability. I would have imagined that if they wanted galvanic shards to act like the other shotgun abilities, they should have given it shock chance. But they want plasma blast to be the shock chance lightning skill. So this has kind of lost a bit of its identity, because I guess if you're going like fizz lightning, then you could break the armor, use high velocity rounds to apply the debuff, and then use galvanic shards to deal additional damage. You know, high quality galvanic shards will hit 10 times. Yeah, I guess, I mean, that's the ethos here, right? They want this to be a shotgun. And firing, you know, was it 7 bolts? Was excessive. But, you know, there are automatic shotguns. They exist. This is meant to be, like, crossbows meant to be the gun class. Automatic shotguns was fine, right? It fits with the lightning thematics. And you have your single use plasma blast for your shock. The plus side of this is that additional bolts loaded mods on crossbows will make galvanic shards much stronger, right? So this is like overall the damage I think has been nerfed slightly. I can't remember, someone did the maths, I think Fubgun did the math on roughly what the damage disparity is, and it's a slight nerf to the damage capability of it. However, if you use a crossbow that has the +1 clip and then also the mod, then it's a massive buff, right? Whereas previously getting the 8th or 9th attack was a much smaller buff. So I think maybe that's the intention here, right? If you want galvanic shards to feel really strong, then you need to be focusing on the increased bolts loaded per clip mods on your weapons. So you just need to be more specific about how you're gearing around certain skills. It's just going to make it feel worse during the campaign. But if they've buffed all the other skills, then maybe that won't matter. Gas grenade no longer has a weird behavior that makes it detonate when it stops bouncing. Instead, it strictly obeys its detonation time. Okay. Can't say I noticed this when I was playing it. I don't know if this is a nerf or a buff. I don't know what decides how many times a grenade bounces. Glacial Bolt. Ice crystals now have more of effect if shattered, and they deal less damage in the first half a second of their duration. This like less damage in the first half a second thing is interesting. So if you're like spamming ice crystals and they're getting destroyed instantly, they're not doing any damage. That doesn't sound particularly like flowy. It doesn't sound very good. I don't know how it's going to feel in practice if you want to be playing Ice Crystals or Frostwall or anything like that. Things that say Consume Freeze no longer have to say it. I think it's just inherent in the ice ability that they shatter frozen enemies. Hailstorm rounds. I'll be honest, I didn't even know this was a crossbow ability. I guess it's Rain of Arrows for crossbows. And it has 100% more reload speed instead of 50% less. I wonder if this will be... this is interesting. Bolts now fall in an expanding circle rather than overlapping with each other. Has an impact radius starting at 1 meter. Out to a radius of 4. The bolts fall faster. There's no minimum distance. And the damage has been buffed. And it has more... oh, so it's the ice... it's like ice Rain of Arrows. Rain of Bolts. That's interesting. I think I still want to go like Fizz Fire. And go like left on the tree. Because I think going right on the tree... I guess they'll need to add cold nodes into the... on the southeast side. So that you're not traveling all the way around the map to get the cold nodes. Herald of Thunder has been slightly nerfed. That's fine. It's still going to be really powerful. As we just talked about, high velocity rounds has been buffed. I kind of want to use this. This sounds really cool. I like the idea of like priming a boss with a high velocity round and then shotgunning them to death. It just sounds fun. Sounds more fun than trying to shock them with Plasma Blast and then Shock Burst rounding them to death. Ice Nova can now consume a cold infusion to deal more damage and create an area of chilled ground. I guess if there's cool ways to interact with chill, great. If the chill helps you kill the enemy that survives the Ice Nova, which I imagine there won't be many, then maybe that's cool. I guess maybe the intention of the combat now is right that you can you run into a rare pack, you can kill the pack around the rare really quickly, and then the rare is left standing, and you go toe to toe with it. I guess that's their vision for the combat, and having AoE abilities that then debuff that rare would play into that vision. Ice Shards now deals more damage. They arm after 1.5 seconds. So this is like Spearfield for ice. Again, they have that priming time where they don't do any damage for the first half a second. Now has an arming time before which it will not explode, even if shot directly under an enemy. So if it can't explode anyway, why did you need to put in the half a second duration? Maybe you can explode them with another ability. Quality now provides shards to chill enemies as though dealing more damage. And I guess chill is also prime for freeze, right? If an enemy is chilled, they should be easier to freeze. That's probably the purpose of chill now. And then you can use your payoff shatter abilities. Incendiary Shot. I tried to make this work on its own as a clearing ability, and I could not get the damage. So ignites inflict 200% faster and have increased duration for each pellet that hits the target. It now has a much higher chance to ignite, or at least apply a flammability. And quality increases the duration instead of magnitude, right? But magnitude is this faster delivery of damage effectively. Yeah, maybe this will be viable now. I want to try it. I'm going to try it on Witch Hunter, I think. I don't know how many fragments Incendiary Shot fires. Let's have a look. Uh, 10. Yeah, so I guess the issue is bolts shatter on impact. So it deals, what's its base damage? 17 to 62. The problem still is, right, that the damage of the ignite is based on the base hit. And what counts as the base hit for 10 fragments? Is it each individual fragment is doing 17 to 62% of your base attack damage? Is it all of them that hit together that decide the magnitude of the ignite? Is it just one of them? I think this was why this felt a bit anemic. Oh, let's close WhatsApp. Where is it? Why is it not on my bar? Oh, it's in my other window, right? No. Where are you? Ah, stop it. Okay. Hopefully that stops. Okay. I don't think you saw those anyway because my camera's in the way. Okay. Incinerator's been reworked. Cool. I never played with it. Maybe I'll play with it if I play Sorceress. Infernal Cry now empowers an attack per enemy power in range up to 50 power instead of based on endurance charges. So this is more of a clearing ability. And it deals more damage. And you can spend endurance charges on it. So rather than generating them, rather than spending them on empowering attacks, you can spend them on additional attacks. No, wait. Let's read this properly. Now it allows you to expend an endurance charge to bypass the cooldown rather than empowering additional attacks. Okay, so you can just keep spamming it. So I guess if you're a warbringer, right, you can just keep spamming the cry as you generate charges by consuming ignites. Killing Palm has been buffed when killing rare and unique monsters. Lightning Bolt. I imagine this was a fix to the builds where Lightning Bolt powered its own meta generation. So it can't generate energy anymore. So that's probably a nerf to auto bombers, I guess. Lightning Conduit I never played with, so I don't know if this is a buff or a nerf. Lightning Rod. Looks like quality has been buffed. So instead of burst radius, you get more bursts, which is a damage buff. So, Lightning Rod was really struggling before, being viable for damage. So it's really good that they improved it. Lightning Spear has been nerfed to not consume frenzy charges for more damage. And less secondary bolts at high levels, so it's not deleting the entire screen, I imagine. And then with the nerf to Tangle Tongue, it's not as easy to get a completely broken Lightning Spear build. It still sounds viable though, right? If you have a good spear, it's still going to be a decent clear skill. It just won't be out and out the best. Solar Orb and Living Bomb have swapped places. So Living Bomb is now a skill gem and Solar Orb is now inherent to staves. Okay. And Living Bomb is now an infusion generating skill. Has a longer duration. But I guess you you apply Living Bomb, blow up the pack, get your infusion, and then go on to the next pack. It doesn't say whether it consumes an infusion. I guess not. Maybe not all skills consume them. I guess choosing which secondary skills can consume infusions is going to be how you manage to not accidentally use them, right? Because I think a couple of the skills that generate infusions can also use them to improve their own damage. I saw in the video, Magma Barrier looks unremarkable now. He was talking about it, and the guy was wandering around with his shield, and he was like, and when it's ready, you put your shield up, and then you get the effect. And I had to rewind the video because I could not see the effect. And it turns out it's this very anemic spray of magma comes out of your shield, and I could not see what the notification was that it was ready. So I guess if you're just always blocking a lot, then this will work. It's an endurance charge generator. Over time, it charges up with lava. And it's based on evasion on your shield. That's interesting. Added fire damage based on evasion on your shield. So is this intended to be a hybrid skill? But we don't have a dex strength melee ascendancy. We only have I guess Gemling. Maybe Gemling would use it. But we okay, one sec. Just going to turn off notifications. Okay. Where were we? Mana drain. Was anyone using mana drain? Don't think so. Mana remnants. Was anyone using mana remnants? Is this a skill? Mana tempest. I don't know what that does. Molten blast now steps backwards instead of forwards. I've heard a lot of people complaining about the fact that it moves you forward. I don't know if they're now going to complain that it moves you backwards. We will see. Or maybe you have to, if you're moving in the opposite direction to where you're targeting, it will move backwards instead of forwards, or if you're attacking in place. So does that mean if you are already moving forward, it will also move forward when you cast it? Yeah, I guess we'll see. We'll see what people complain about. Okay, Orb of Storms. Now triggers from casting any spell in its radius. Previously only lightning spells. But previously incorrectly described as all lightning skills. I guess, yeah, Orb of Storms was being used with Lightning Arrow. It says incorrectly described, but I thought people were using it with Lightning Arrow. Maybe not. Also creates an infusion remnant if all its bolts are used up. And reduced maximum bolts. Increased radius. Deals more maximum damage. Significantly more maximum damage. Almost double. And less minimum damage. Also fires a bolt every 4 seconds. Or when you're using a lightning skill near the orb. And it has longer duration. Yeah, so I guess no longer are you going to be wanting to use this with anything except spells because it doesn't work. Well, I guess technically it works, but then what are you going to do with the infusion? So this is just a spell now. This is not for anyone else. Tooltip change. Perfect Strike has been buffed to do... no, it's been... does less damage but has more range. I imagine the range is because very mobile bosses, I imagine, were dodging out of the way of Perfect Strikes. And I imagine they were like just missing or something as they dodged away. So like more than doubling the melee range means you'll do less damage when you hit, but you'll hit more often. Permafrost Bolts has more freeze build up, significantly more freeze build up, so, and less damage. So this is just for freezing. And Plasma Blast has more magnitude of shock, less chance to shock, and converts more fizz damage to lightning. That's fine because it does so much damage that it shocked. So I guess the more chance to shock was it was a nice bonus. It made it almost always shock. So now I guess if you are struggling to shock with Plasma Blast, you're going to need to invest in shock chance. They've buffed Poison Burst Arrows quality to give more magnitude instead of increased magnitude. That sounds significant. Rain of Arrows has had its rate of damage increased instead of increased projectiles. Zombies I don't care about. Rake Stomping Ground is dead. This is not the way you can level now. That's fine, I think, right? It was I didn't do it for my I did do it for my first character, actually. No, I did. When I League started Hardcore Solo Self-Found, my first two characters, I used Rake because it was kind of a no-brainer when I didn't have any gear. The spearheads left by the final strike of Rapid Assault, which is a spear skill, I guess, now last for 30 seconds. I don't know what they do. Rapid Shot no longer has the minigun wind-up or less reload speed. Instead, they're forcing it to be a secondary or a build-up skill, right? So you want to reach maximum heat, and when you do, you can't use Rapid Shot for 10 seconds. It generates the heat per attack instead of over time. And if you don't reach maximum heat, it starts decaying after 4 seconds at a rate of 10 heat per second. So you could, if you had a rotation where, you didn't have 10 seconds worth of things to do, then you're going to have to stop firing before you get to 100%. And then the grenades consume flat heat to gain 50% of damage as fire damage. And Incendiary Shot creates ignite magnitude from 30 heat. We'll have to see. I guess this is a skill I need to consider building into my crossbow build. The fact that Incendiary Shot, which I'm going to have to reopen it. Oh, I already have it open. Good. It loads one bolt. And each bolt will consume 30% of the heat. So if you hit maximum heat, it's interesting, right? Like, because the heat will start decaying after 4 seconds. So I wonder if you can get 3 incendiary shots off within... So what would you need? So at 5 seconds, you have 90 heat. The reload speed is 0.7. Yeah, you can probably use all the heat, right? But you still have to wait like another couple of seconds before you can rapid shot again. Yeah, we'll have to see how this plays. I might test it out. It seems only explosive grenade, cluster grenade, and incendiary shot use the heat. It's a shame like armor piercing round or high velocity round doesn't. Which one was it? High velocity. Be cool if high velocity could use it as well. You could like high velocity round, gain some extra fire damage on the armor, fully broken armor consume buff. Be interesting as well if you can like fully break armor with a single round of rapid shot. So you like fully break rapid shot armor, rapid shot to fully break armor, fire your high velocity round, and then 3 incendiary shots, 2 of which probably will be buffed. Maybe the third. Or maybe you like, fire off a grenade. I don't know. Quality grants maximum heat up to 15. So that's 115. Yeah. I wonder if there's any other sources of heat generation or maximum heat so that you can actually spend the entire 10 seconds spending the heat. That would be interesting. Row amount has been buffed to be sprint, you know, when you're not in combat, when you're not firing. That makes sense, right? Because row amount was your base move speed. So now that they've added sprint in, they needed to increase the move speed of row amount. Ripwire Ballista, it's not interesting. Rolling Slam has an increased attack time, but no longer has an attack speed penalty. What does that mean? What is the attack speed penalty of Rolling Slam? And how does it interact with plus? So I guess if you have really fast attack speed, attack speed is 65% of base. So now it's 100% of base, but there's an extra half a second added attack time. Okay. I guess I assume this balances out. But I'm not sure how. Scavenge plating has 4% more armor instead of 3 to 5 when you get to 20. Less thorns. And increased duration on quality. Alright, Siege Cascade. Impact now deals way more damage. The explosion deals way more damage. No longer deals more damage against immobilized enemies. No longer has a hidden less stun buildup against enemies. No longer converts fizz to fire or has payoff tags. Payload radius is smaller, as is the bolt explosion. And the delay between payload and bolt explosion is longer. So it's a pure fizz ability now. Let's have a look at Siege Cascade. What other interesting things does it have about it? Less reload speed. 1 bolt per clip. Load your crossbow with enemy-seeking payloads which are fired up into the air, dropping a bolt near every enemy in the target area. These bolts lodge in the ground and explode after a short delay. Aim skyward and fire an enemy-seeking payload which drops a bolt near every enemy in the target area, which is 0.6 seconds after they delay. So it doesn't say... There's not a limit, I think, to how many bolts it can fire. And it can stun now. So it's not a fire ability anymore. It's slower, but does more damage. It had the payoff tag, but it doesn't... Like, it doesn't consume anything. So I guess that's why they removed the payoff tag. It didn't consume anything before, and it doesn't now. Seismic Cry. Cooldown is not reset if it doesn't empower an attack. Stuns enemies that are primed and empowers attacks if it stuns them. Right. Okay. Shield Charge has been nerfed as a movement skill, but had its cooldown removed. So I imagine this means that sprinting should be faster than shield charging. Increased base attack time, but deals more damage based on distance traveled. Area of effect now deals less attack damage, while the collision deals less attack damage. And quality provides more damage based on distance traveled. So it might be a fun ability to use. You know, you can like shield charge from a distance to deal maximum damage. Like it's very what's the word? Has a high skill cap. Shield wall I didn't know was an ability, but it sounds really cool. Shock burst rounds has been nerfed 15%. I don't think that's going to make a difference to how powerful this is, especially with the increased shock duration. I think if you want to play shock burst rounds for bossing, then you're still going to be able to, and it's going to do enough damage. 15% isn't a massive nerf. You're going to need, you know, better gear to kill T4s in a reasonable amount of time, but I don't think this is not a big nerf. It probably means you can't like easily delete bosses with it as quickly, but yeah. But you can spend more time shooting. So, I mean, when I did T3 Zesht, I was using Shock Burst. I didn't have like massive bonuses, so I wasn't like nuking him down super quick, but it was doing like really decent damage. If the fight goes on longer, it goes on longer. Totems don't matter. I don't know what Siphoning Strike does. Skeletal stuff. I've never used the perfect attack skills. I know Snipe now looks like it does insane damage against a frozen target. That's probably quite fun. You know, again, high skill, right? You need to freeze the target and then also not mess up the timing of your attack while they're frozen. You're only going to have like one chance, right, to get this off. And then you're going to have to set up the freeze again, right, which they're going to be more resistant to. Solar Orb no longer has a mana cost. That's because it's been moved to the staff. Spark can use cold infusions, which we saw in the video. Look pretty cool. Spear of Solaris deals less damage because everyone was using Spear of Solaris, right? While the Pulse deals more damage. The Ignited Ground gains radius based on the spear's lifetime. What determines the spear's lifetime? Let's bring it over. Build glory by heavy stunning enemies. When you have maximum glory, you may cast Spear of Solaris. Jumping backwards and throwing your spear in the air. On landing, the spear deals heavy damage and then calls a divine sky beam that pulses periodically and creates an expanding ignited ground. Cannot improve the number of projectiles. Cannot be evaded. The initial impact. And it pulses for 10 seconds. So, and quality increases the chance to retain glory on use, so you can use it more times. It sounds like this sounds like a buff, right? If you can keep the boss in the area, which you should be able to do because you just heavy stunned them, though not for 10 seconds, I imagine. Spearfield has been buffed. Oh, right. Okay. It's 300% more damage after half a second has been removed, and the base damage has been increased. And now instead of the more damage after half a second, it does less damage in the first half a second. You know, I don't know if this is a wash. Spearfield, I think, was pretty strong. Maybe it'll still be strong. Stormwave now hits targets slightly either side of your character. Right, that's the like 3 snaking lightning things. That's probably a buff, so that you're not like, when you're in a pack, you can actually still kill the pack, rather than needing to be slightly away from them. Stormblast bolts deal more damage and have longer duration. Let's have a look. What was Stormblast? bolts. Are they the ones that shock? 5 bolts per clip. Detonator skills. Like. Detonator gem tag. Let's search that. Explosive grenade. Explosive shot. Can explode stormblast bolt. So I guess if you want to go fire lightning, that's the only way you're going to explode those. Unless you have a alternate gear set. Like you could use explosive spear or detonating arrow if you have a bow in your offhand. It does quite a lot more damage. Maybe not a lot more, right? 183 to 222 min, 388 to 470 max. I guess that's a decent amount. Maybe it's viable. Who knows? Sunder no longer has the added attack time, but has 35% attack speed. It no longer consumes broken armor. Instead, it inflicts sundered armor. So this is the like melee version of high velocity rounds. Supercharged slam has been buffed. Tempest Bell has been had its quality buffed, I guess. But you can't have multiple bells now. Actually, this feels like a nerf, right? I don't know if 2 more hits might be more damage than what's its total hits? 10. So it's 3, 6, 9, up to 30% more damage on each. Okay, maybe this is a buff. I think this might be a buff. Temp Chains has greater slow magnitude and lower gem requirement. But I think, you know, generally curses need to be higher level to apply to higher level creatures. So you can start using it earlier, but you can't keep it low level. Nearly at the end. Time of Need has been switched to an Strength Int gem. This is pretty good. I think if you're a hybrid character and you want to run curse maps, Time of Need cleanses curses from you. So if you want to run Temp Chains maps and you're, you know, a crossbow user, for instance, that's using evasion and energy shield, then Time of Need is viable. I couldn't meet the attribute requirements when I was trying to use it. I mean, I could at a low level, right? But you want it much more frequent than that, so it wasn't really worth using. Toxic Growth has been buffed and no longer causes you to leap into the air, so this is just a straight poison skill now. Trinity applies to all elemental damage instead of elemental attack damage. And Quality grants skill speed, and it's now Dex Int instead of pure Dex. I think there was some Trinity builds running around, right, with Coming Calamity and Painter's Servant, trying to balance their elemental attack damage. Maybe now with the infusions in Sorceress, there might be some cool builds with the Trinity for that. Unearth is now better. Vaulting Impact can now allow you to jump over terrain, much like Leap Slam can. And they've improved camera movement. Volcanic Fissure, we saw in the video, has been changed. I don't know what it looked like before though, so I will plead ignorance here. Voltaic Grenade seems like it now has Lesser damage, but a stronger chance to electrocute. 210 to 340% more build up instead of 50%, which is significant. I did try using Voltaic Grenade and it never did anything. You know, I never electrocuted any enemies with it. Vulnerability has been buffed. I wonder if these changes are because of the less effective curses on unique enemies. Right, this is nearly double at the top end, which is going to be significant for normal monsters. But it's going to be the same as it was before for uniques. Also incentivizes you to level up the gem. Banners, Wave of Frost, now freezes enemies that are primed. Does that mean chilled? Is chilled primed for freeze? Or is it a different build-up? Whirling Slash. Movement is now able to pathfind slightly, making it less likely to get stuck on small obstacles. I didn't know that was a problem. More whirlwinds from Whirlwind Lance with longer duration. Wasn't this like a super broken build? Who was it? Was it Prada? I think Prada created this Ritualist Whirlwind Lance build, which looked really cool. So that's just a flat buff. Wind Serpent's Fury. I guess this removes its one-shot. I think knocking the bosses into the wall was what was one-shotting them, right? I'm not sure if it's still going to one-shot when it consumes Fury. Consumes Frenzy. Wind Blast now always dazes instead of building up daze. And then I guess you want to use an ability that consumes or adds that extra buff onto daze. Updated the description for Raging Spirits to clarify that the Flaming Skulls do not follow player commands as they're busy raging. I like that. That's nice. Tooltip update to confirm why you cannot control your Raging Skulls. Tooltip updates. Updated the wording and presentation for Plaguebearer to be more simplified. Okay. And Thunderous Leap can detonate spear skills. Alright, so that's all the skill changes. It's going to be tough to choose between Sorceress and Crossbow, but I think I just keep coming back to Crossbow. Beerah's Anguish now is nerfed. No longer ignites enemies in your presence. It creates ignited ground. I know there was a build that used this. Has the damage been? No, the damage is the same, but it's now ignited ground instead of just immediately igniting everything in your presence. I guess the it is a nerf, right? Because you can increase ignite duration, whereas you can't increase this duration. And then there's been like some updates to some uniques that no one used. Maybe people use Bones of Earl Ulra, but they've given it movement speed. Brisk Wrap is better for leveling because you get deflection rating. They've nerfed sources of crit damage bonus like on Death's Harp, and crit weakness on Effigy of Cruelty. Less crit damage bonus on Malagaro's Virtuosity. Days on hit instead of days build up. Change the wording for mana cost reduction in mana cost to efficiency. I've never seen Quattle's Molt, but it now has deflection. Tangle Tongue is dead, which is probably a good thing, right? It was very easy to get a Tangle Tongue, and if you got a good roll, you could do all content, right, with a really low level spear. I don't think that's intended. Whispering Ice, inflict elemental exposure instead of cold. Right, okay, that's just the change to exposure. Same with Zoth's Blood. Maybe Zoth's Blood is good now. I think it was good anyway, but now it's like a general elementalist neck. Might be good. What is it? Let's have a look at Zoth's Blood. Enemies in your presence are exposed. Yeah. Zoth's Blood might be just generally quite good now that it does all 3 types of exposure. They have removed the following uniques. Inferno Clasp. I guess because of Smith and it just being like a way to get insane amounts of all res. Forbidden Gaze. Why have they removed Forbidden Gaze? Oh, because it sucks. Thunderstep. Why have they removed Thunderstep? Is it because it sucks? Yes. Okay, so they've removed the 3 uniques that grant maximum elemental resistance. That's interesting. No one used them anyway, apart from Inferno Class because of Smith. I guess I was using Inferno Class for leveling for a bit as well, because it was just a decent source of resistance. The Wailing Wall. Can block damage from all hits. Cannot use shield skills. Was this being used? Reduced movement speed? I can't imagine people were wanting to use that. They might just be removing these because they don't really have a role. Or they interact too strongly with the other changes that are being made. Fallen Formation. Banners always have maximum valor. I guess with the change to banners, maybe this was going to be too good. Wyland's Stake. Inflicts fire exposure when you fully break armor. Wow, it's like a level 4. Yeah, I guess this is just it's just bad. The Deepest Tower is gone. I think we all know why. I think they underestimated how popular that would be. And the Remembered Tales have been removed, which grants you Blessed Bonds, which is an exposure-based unique. Okay, so I guess maybe they just didn't have time to change these uniques, right? They changed some of the uniques to grant they changed some of the uniques to just grant general exposure, and maybe like these, like, you know, other exposure based uniques just lost their identity a bit and they need to figure out what they should do. And then a bunch of shields have had their block chance reduced. All right, item changes. They have renamed Distilled Emotions to Liquid Emotions and created tiers. Diluted, Concentrated. I guess it goes Diluted, Liquid Emotion, Concentrated. Are there only 9 Distilled Emotions? Is it 3 of each? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are 10. And they've got new art. Orb of Chance is more likely to succeed on jewelry, belts, and charms. Cool. You can get more Vaal Orbs from Trials of Chaos and less from other sources. Will this increase the value of Vaal Orbs, maybe? The following omens can no longer be attained. Greater Annulment. I guess it was kind of boring, even though it is useful. Dextral and Sinistral Alchemy, Dextral and Sinistral Coronation, right? These are the prefix and suffix. Alchemy and regal omens. And now that, I guess this just shows that their intention of these omens was to roll maps. Either you wanted to roll Waystone focused maps for citadels, or you wanted to roll prefix focused maps for everything else. Now that they've changed Waystones, you don't need these omens anymore, because that was really their only use. I don't know why else you would want to use them on normal gear. There is no benefit to rolling prefixes or suffixes first. Like maybe on a weapon you'd want to roll prefixes first to see if you get good ones and save yourself a couple of exalts, but it's not a very satisfying crafting process, so I understand why they've removed these. Talismans, I think like it seems like soul cores and talismans have just had a bunch of either buffs or nerfs. So they have nerfed iron runes. I imagine they've nerfed iron runes to make it more of a choice as to which runes you put in your weapons, because I did a bunch of POB planning, and even, where is it? The one that grants increased elemental damage. This one that's been nerfed as well. Grants you effectively 15% more damage on your weapon. The answer was always Iron Rune. It didn't seem to matter, even if like the roll of the crossbow was, you know, lower fizz and more elemental. Iron Rune was still the best by far. It wasn't even close. I mean, I had to manually add the modifiers for this soul core because it wasn't updated in POB for this soul core. But sure, you know, Iron Rune's getting a slight nerf, right? They're also nerfed in armor, so that, you know, maybe it's more of a choice if you want to use different runes rather than being like, okay, well, I'm evasion, energy shield, or pure energy shield. I guess I need to stick iron runes in to maximize my chest and my helmet. And we don't know what if they've changed any of those nodes on the passive tree, right? Like Subterfuge Mask or the chest one. Maybe they've nerfed those a bit as well. Who knows? Reduce sources of block chance. Reduce sources of critical damage bonus. And I think critical damage bonus on weapons in particular also was multiplicative with sources of critical damage bonus from other sources, in the same way that attack speed is. The critical damage bonus, I think, was rolling inherent to the weapon in the same way that the attack speed is inherent to the base attack speed of the weapon. And so stacking tons of it was why crit was so good. So maybe they haven't changed that interaction, they've just toned it down. Items with skills can now roll up to level 20, which is pretty cool. Yeah. I remember running Decomposed Boots, and if they'd have been level 20, they'd have been even better, though they were perfectly fine at level 18. Some of the Spirits Talismans have been buffed by quite a bit. We'll have to see if it makes them good. I don't think many of them were being used. They've also changed where some of them are used. So increased block chance on shields instead of presence on boots. They've increased chaos damage. Might be good for certain builds. Increased presence area of effect. Less important now that the deepest tower is gone. Cooldown recovery rate. Might be important. They've added so the faster start of energy shield recharge, evasion as deflect, and percentage of armor to elemental damage are all suffixes, which is good, right? Because you're going to be then balancing resistances. You won't need as many attributes because of the reduction in requirements. And so maybe instead of where you would have had an attribute, you can have one of these to improve your evasion armor or energy shield. And recharge rate rolls on gloves, boots, and helmets. So I guess they want you to be avoiding damage while your energy shield recharges from now on. Damage gained as extra elemental, increased mana regeneration rate, increased crit chance for spells, and increased critical spell damage bonus modifiers on staves have higher values. So I guess they're trying to make staves an alternative to wands and foci. And they've reduced the top end of crit chance for spells on wands and foci. I think one of the challenges is, right, it's still... Oh no, it's... yeah. Maybe this is enough to make staves competitive. They've removed minion accuracy from duels. That's good, right? One less mod in the pool. Same with scepters. Stag Talisman has been changed to added damage instead of accuracy. I didn't know this lesser adept bug was happening. And they've renamed the base type. So it does sound like when they said they've added 50 new base types, I think they might have added a bunch of the unique base types that weren't in the game. So that's a buff to people that want to either play semi-solo self-found or solo self-found, because now you can actually find bases for the gloves that you want, for the uniques that you want to try and chance. I hope that's what that means. The point of chance orbs, right, is that you can try and luck into uniques that are good for your build without needing to buy them, or, you know, rolling the lottery on really rare uniques. So the more opportunities you can use those, the better. Also removed weapon swap speed from the corruption and dual pool, which is a buff. Monsters are less evasive as they get to a higher level. That's, I think, a good change. In combination with the increased accuracy, you're just going to be solving for accuracy less, which wasn't particularly fun to do. Zarok no longer one-shots you. I don't really understand this. If you fail to collect the hourglasses, he enters a secondary phase where the hourglasses and slow debuff persists, but a much lower rate. So I guess you still need to collect the rest of the hourglasses, but he comes back and starts using his skills while you're slow debuffed and trying to collect them. And you can't collect them. And you can't get rid of the debuff until you've collected them all. So it's still going to be a relative fail state, right? You're still going to really struggle to dodge his abilities, but he doesn't just come and one-tap you because you can't collect hourglasses. I can't say I've ever had this happen. It's a pretty easy mechanic. I've definitely had it... When did I almost failed once when I entered the hourglass phase. I think I had grasping vines from him hitting me just before we entered. And that started my base speed so low that I almost didn't make it, but I just did. Act bosses have had their life reduced in Act 3. They should probably apply this to Jamun-Ra. I think Jamun-Ra is too much of a roadblock for a lot of people. Though perhaps that's just because most people were playing meta skills, which are all lightning based, and he has really high lightning resistance. I found getting conductivity before Jamun-Ra really helped. Rogue exiles are harder to kill. Sure. Non-unique items are now affected by increased rarity. So this is probably a good change, right? In combination with them being more challenging, they also wear rares more, which makes sense, right? You're encountering these like other exiles in high tier maps, and their gear sucks. It doesn't make any sense. Monsters in the Wildwood map have a lower aggro range while in the darkness. I don't know. Like, the fact that you could get a bunch of extra monster kills without needing to explore, I didn't think was a terrible thing. They've renamed Rattlecage. The periodic invulnerability aura monster modifier now only makes things immune to damage from enemies. What does this change mean for that aura? What does from enemies mean? Is this, maybe this is something to do with Tamed Beast? Reduce the number of river hags that spawn in the Drowned City. Yeah, they're pretty scary. I imagine even scarier for melee characters who have to like actually travel through the spells they cast. Incrementally improved monster behavior. Well, they were very naughty before. The hunt begins must now be completed in a single instance. You only have to complete it once per league. I'm not sure what the hunt begins is. Oh, it's the first Asmiri spirit. Zarka now offers the passage record if you didn't take it from her in the outskirts. Oh, okay. I guess I'd never forgotten to take that reward, or if I had, it was inconsequential. Not even sure what the reward is. User interface changes. Show number of rerolls available. I guess that's nice for people that can't count to 2 or 4. Or remember a number between 1 and 4. Modifier ranges on items now show a positive sign if it spans both negative and positive. Wisp minimap icons are no longer removed if you run out of range. That's quite good because sometimes they like run off and then you don't know where they've gone when you're like stuck in the chaos of everything. You can respawn at checkpoint from the escape menu in the trials. You can now remove buffs when you're using controller and the game is paused. That's a nice change. There were instances where I wanted to do that and I couldn't because I generally play on controller. They've enabled a bunch of microtransactions, and I read through these bugs earlier, and I can't say many of them came up. I think they said in an interview, right, that they have really tried to reduce the number of OS freeze crashes in Windows 11. I am on Windows 11. I have had my computer shut down. It doesn't happen every session. Maybe 1 in 3 sessions, I open an instance and my computer shuts down. So if they've fixed that, brilliant. If it's Windows 11 based or NVIDIA based, hopefully they've worked with Microsoft and NVIDIA to fix those. And then they've made one update since these notes came out. They've added the endurance charges requirement to Ancestral Warrior Totem. I will refresh, see if they've added anything else. No. And that's the patch notes. So now I have to make a decision between Crossbow and Sorceress, but we'll cross that bridge next week. I think on Sunday I'm going to practice some Act 1 to 3 runs on a fresh character, just because I quite like doing it. I joined the Discord that has all of those layouts, so I'm going to try and learn some of them at least. So I'll be like referring to the Discord and the images in there and seeing if it improves my fresh character time. My like pimped character time got down to like 7 hours. If I could do the same with a fresh character, brilliant. I'll probably try and do it with the Mercenary if that's what I'm going to be league starting. So yeah. But otherwise, thanks for watching. If you were, hopefully this was interesting for you, this reading stream. And we'll get back to playing some games on Sunday. Otherwise, have a good weekend. I'll see you soon. Bye.